So let's talk a little bit about some practical examples of like what this is like when you are attached to a goal, when you have commitment to a goal, when you are attached to your team, when you really sincerely want to succeed. Like this is not an unusual situation. Even people that are grinding away every day in a job that they don't necessarily 100% believe in, a little bit frustrated with their situation, a little bit frustrated with their life choices. My experience is that many of them still have within them this seed of like, I really want to do something great. If I just had the chance, I could do something great. Right. So I'll have an example in my former corporate life. I had the opportunity to run a innovation project, kind of a sidebar, where we brought people in from across the organization and had them come up with ideas for business improvements. And then we're mentoring them through this kind of 8-week sprint on the side of their regular jobs, hour or two a week, like come up with a way to do something, a new product for the company or a new improvement that we could make through a design thinking process, thinking about the customer value, thinking about the business value, trying to get to the point where we could sort of shortcut a presentation to the leaders about these things that we could do. And it was, some of the ideas were silly and most of the ideas were quite good, and technically feasible or not or whatever. But the thing that I was amazed about this 8-week process that people were doing voluntarily in a framework that we, kind of adapted from different pieces in a slightly different way than we'd ever done inside the organization. The amount of emotional weight that showed up in those meetings. We had teams of people from different groups that had never worked with each other before that spent like 20 hours together over the space of 6 weeks, became incredibly close friends. We had tears, we had rage, we had incandescent, upset people in the middle of the meeting room. Like all of that energy, all of that emotion, all of that commitment was there already. And it was just like puncturing a balloon and it comes out. And like, you put some people together that have similar goals, but not quite the same goals. And they become incredibly frustrated because they're so excited to have the chance to show themselves, so excited to have the chance for their idea to get out there in the world. It was really informative for me. Literally, like we had people crying in meeting rooms talking about trying to get this, this widget, this piece of software, this piece of hardware onto a car. It was a really interesting experience and kind of fabulous to see the passion and the creativity that was sort of there under the surface of people that were showing up to work every day and doing a really great job, but not kind of getting to that level of engagement with their day-to-day, with the 40 hours a week that they were committed to. And so I think that, this movie shows us, Frankie and Maggie starting from, if not zero, at least from a fairly not having a lot to hold on to. And that's part of what allows them to take these risks. But that's not that unusual. People have these aspirations. They have these incredible drives. They have this incredible frustration with the state of events very frequently that's in there. And it's totally possible to tap into that. And there's potential joy, there's potential excitement, there's potential like, I came up with this amazing thing. But there's also potential real pain. There's potential real frustration. There's potential real guilt as a leader if you tap into that and then you can't land the deal. You can't successfully get that project approved. You can't successfully let that person thrive in the way that they're picturing. You almost feel like it's on you, even though you like put all this energy into standing up the opportunity and putting them in a position to succeed. If they don't all succeed, you feel like it's your fault.
Yeah, there's that spirit that you're talking about that's inside of everyone, that we want to dream. We want to believe that we can do bigger things. We want to challenge the existing status quo. And it's different in each person, but you're right. If it's allowed to foster, basically, there is that spirit inside of each person to create something. I think would be like the simplest way to describe it. And you're trying to unlock it as a leader. You're trying to help other people to be able to create. And it is a little bit like what Frankie's dealing with here. He can see when he meets Maggie that she's got this great fire in her. Like, what better definition of a spirit in somebody that is, allowing them to do something that it's very fiery. And that is what we see with Maggie. But he is worried about being able to control it. And he almost at first believes that there's some responsibility that he has to actually control that fire, when in reality, Brian, is that something that you should be concerned with as a leader?
It is. It goes back to the conversation about risk aversion, is that you want to look for that, right? When you're going to put your energy into mentoring somebody, when you're trying to build a team to accomplish something in the world, whether it's your goal or theirs that you're trying to accomplish, like that fire is an amazing asset. You're looking for people that are going to persist. You're looking for people that have the superpower of commitment. Absolutely. You're looking to align them and you're looking to build their skills. But there's that risk, right? If you have that much commitment to something that could fail, because all initiatives can fail, when you have that much commitment and you could fail, you have the potential for frustration. You have the potential for pain. You have the potential for suffering. You have the potential for real guilt and grief. And this movie, again, as Hollywood does, makes it a really exaggerated version, not an end of the world, Thanos is going to kill half of all sentient beings and, bad thing, but this person that Frankie loves gets permanently injured, like becomes, she's on a ventilator, paralyzed in a hospital, no longer able to aspire to her goals. That's still a pretty big, glossy Hollywood version of risk, but it's a real risk, right? That you can not only fail, but fail spectacularly in a way that you can't get up from. And that happens in life. And as a leader, you will often be faced with that, like the things that people that you mentor, people that are on your team may not succeed, and it will feel like your fault, even if they were committed and would have tried it anyway. So I think that's one of the things that's really powerful about this movie, is just sort of illustrating that risk. Is you will inevitably become attached. If you truly share goals, if you truly share effort and time together with people, you will inevitably become attached to their success, and you will inevitably experience pain and suffering when things don't go the way you expect. And like we talked about in the first episode, I don't think you could watch this movie and go, well, Maggie should have stayed a waitress, right? And she shouldn't have tried. I don't think you could watch this movie and say, well, Frankie should have just told her to, like, you can keep punching that bag, but I'm not training you. There's no way you should ever get in the ring. You're too old. I don't think that's the lesson that most of us take away from watching these kinds of stories. You said there's a lot of possible outcomes from being in a boxing ring, and most of them are you retire and you weren't the champion and you may have suffered some physical ailments, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that nobody should strive to achieve their goals. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be willing to train somebody to do something risky.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million different anecdotes of wisdom about this, right? It's better to have tried and failed than not to have tried at all. It's better to have loved and have lost than never to have loved at all. And we're seeing both of those things kind of pulled through together right here. And so let's go up to our mountaintop and see what we can see here, Brian. Let's talk about the moment where we see Frankie kind of have this transition from being super protective, very risk averse with Maggie, to allowing a little bit more risk. And through that, kind of what changes that makes in their relationship and in the world at large.
I think the moment in this movie is where, after kind of working her way up through the ranks and kind of doing as he did with his previous fighter, he keeps telling her, you're not quite ready for a fight. You only get one really good shot at this, which is his rationale for, like, you might get hurt and you might fail and you might not be able to come back and succeed. So I want to delay the potential failure as long as possible. He finally gives in, right? He sees her persist through other fights, and finally he gives in. He's like, all right, I scheduled a fight for you with this British champion. We're going to fly over to England. You're going to get a shot to defeat a very highly ranked fighter. And right before they go out, walk out to the ring, he gives her this, elaborate, fairly garish green coat that's got some Gaelic inscription on the back of it. But he won't tell her what the Gaelic means. And so it's kind of a fun moment, because we finally learn at the end of the movie, the translation of the Gaelic Mo Cushla is something like the pulse of my heart. It's a love, it's family, it's, I'm bought in, we're one. Like, it's a very loving, attached thing. And he's completely bought into Maggie's success. He's completely bought into, he and Maggie are perfectly aligned on the goals, and he has accepted the risk that she could get hurt. He's accepted the fact that she wants to take the big swing and take the big risk and potentially be really successful and potentially get hurt, right? And that's a shift for him, where he's been telling her all along, always protect yourself, where he's been sort of guarding himself all along. He's been gradually opening up. And this is the point at which he is completely bought into the level of commitment that she has of trying to achieve the goal over the risk of getting her.
Yeah. I love the putting on of the green jacket, right? Because it's the first time that we really kind of see her more as a professional boxer versus as an amateur too, as the audience. And this movie does such a good job with this kind of chiaroscuro style of like light shining into the darkness. Very common way to do things in movies coming back from the Renaissance. I'm sure there's a lot more art stuff that people could tell me about that I don't know about, but it reminds me a lot of chiaroscuro styling. And so I'm sure it's inspired by it, where you have this like darkness with light shining in, and it's the focal point of the light that's meaningful. And you get this so many different times with Mokushla, with Maggie, this light breaking through the darkness, but the darkness still being there. And to me, that is the conflict that we see in Frankie. The darkness is never really gone, but there's a light that shines through it. And when you focus on the light, there's something worth living for. There's something worth continuing to take risks for. So there is a question that it brings to mind to me, because we're not here to analyze the life of Maggie in this movie, right? But we're here to talk about the conflict of leadership. But I think these are the questions that you have to ask yourself. This is the philosophy that we have to develop ourselves. Maggie has, 33, 34 years of life, and most of it she would call was nothing. But then she has a year or more at the end there where she does something that she's really passionate about, where that light shines really brightly. So I think we all have to ask ourselves this question. Would it be worth it to take the risk if you had just 1 year, just 1 year to do something meaningful, where you were able to feel fulfilled, where you were able to shine that light out into the world, that unique light that you have? And what would it be enough if it was just 1 month that you could do that, and that would be it? Or would it, you can keep going down, right? Is 1 day, would it be worth trading it for 1 day to have that versus not to have it for the rest of your life?
Right. Yeah, it's an impossible question, but the potential for that day, the potential for that month, the potential for that year, for that glorious future success is, if it's still out there in front of you, I think this movie is hopeful about trying for it, right? We see Frankie coming in as he knows very well the risks, right? He's very apprehensive because of the risks, despite his expertise, because of his expertise. Like, he knows, right, that people in a boxing ring could get hurt. He knows that he could set somebody up for failure, right? And so he's naturally very cautious about it. But it's not entirely his idea, right? He's not like going and plucking Maggie off the street and trying to convince her that she can be successful and trying to convince her that she should go risk herself in the ring. She kind of really wants to do that already. He has to decide whether he's going to take on the emotional burden of training her and being involved in that risk, exposing himself to the potential for the emotional pain, right? He has to decide that, but it's not his commitment, it's her commitment that moves this thing forward. And so I think you have to respect people's willingness to take on risks in their own lives, and you can choose to help them if you feel like you're the right person to help them. You can choose to be on their team or have them on your team.
Yeah, and in that situation, right, to know that what our job is to have high integrity. It's to have high character and embody that for other people, so that person that you are leading, that you're mentoring, that they too might see that and might strive towards that. Because really, like you said, if Maggie has this fire inside of her, if that person that you're leading has this fire inside them that you're a little bit worried about, because you're like, that fire could kind of burn out of control.
Uh-huh.
The question is not if that fire should be stoked or not. To me, it's, am I the right person to be stoking that fire? And then if I am going to be, am I doing it responsibly? Am I doing it in a way where my actions that I'm taking, the questions I'm asking, the stories I'm telling to this person, the time I'm spending with them, is modeling what I understand to be the best possible way to live? That way, regardless of how that fire ends up burning, I did my job. I completed my task.
Yeah, and you have to match that level of commitment, right? That's the challenge, right? We see that early in the movie where he tries to pawn her off on another manager for her first real fight. He's like, okay, well, I trained you, but now you can go have this other. Like, that's not the point at which she needs less help from him when she has her first real test. That's not the point at which you should just like pass her off to somebody that's disinterested. That fight doesn't go well. Like, she's getting beat up because she doesn't have somebody in her corner who's committed. And he's unhappy about it. Like everybody's unhappy at that point, right? If you're going to take that challenge on, you have to match the level of commitment. And that's the tension that we see throughout this movie. That's the thing to be aware of as the leader, is that matching the commitment, is that getting involved in these extraordinary goals is inevitably exposing yourself to risk. There's no always protect yourself and strive for something great.